I'm Bob Grossman. Welcome to my listening studio. I want to introduce you to other changes and the equipment I have in my room. So, we have this Prima Luna Dialogue Premium Preamplifier, and that makes a very good match with the Prologue Premium CD player. Underneath that, for the phono stage, is the Manley Chinook, and that's with this VPI Prime turntable. And alternative amplifiers I've been using are these Aragon Palladium models. The speakers are a combination of the Magnapan 20.7 panel speakers along with JL E112 subs, and I do have a sub for each side of the speakers. The cabling is a variety of cables from Joe Kubala. They're his power cords, interconnects, as well as the speaker cables. My power cords are connected to 3 dedicated 20 amp lines, and the cables are suspended in a variety of wood holders. There's Cardus blocks for the power cords, and then I have maple towers that I've made for the interconnects and speaker cables. The shelving is maple shade, and I've upgraded that to the 4-inch shelves, and each of the shelves is also sitting platform for further isolation and suspension of all the equipment. All the equipment is under footers from Herbie's Audio Lab for further vibration control and isolation. There's tubes have been upgraded to new old stock tubes for the Prima Luna equipment, and sometimes I use French tubes. Currently I'm using British tubes. The rectifier tubes are vintage tubes from Philips. And that completes the basic rundown of the equipment in the system. The rest of the room has a lot of artwork and decor. Gives it a nice comfortable feeling. I have various posters from my trips around the world with the orchestra and with the Philadelphia Orchestra. And many of the conductors have signed messages to me thanking me for my work and contributions for them. And my record collection is somewhat here in the living room, and CDs, but down in my basement are another 2,000 records that would be too overwhelming to have up here in the room. Okay, well, now that we've had a bit of an introduction to the stereo system and my room, we're going to go into the actual review. My listening experiences and evaluations were extensive with many prolonged sessions. Some days I just listened to music hours long and didn't pay particular attention to the stereo outside of having a very good time. Other times were spent going through specific reference recordings from my extensive collection with various recordings that I've heard for many years. The initial sound of the amp, newly unpacked from the box, was strong and powerful. The bass panels were given a wake-up call and commanded to vibrate and move some serious amounts of air. The notorious Maggie Slam became apparent. The impacted sound of a big bass panel like the 20.7 speakers have, and that's the bass panel is that very large, long left side. And it's quite a different experience compared to the conventional cone drivers. The original 3-piece folding flagship model from Magnapan looked more like a room screen and was called the timpani model for good reason. The large mylar panels stretched on the hidden metal frames vibrated like the calfskin heads on a timpani or bass drum. Those timpani speakers were the most lifelike sound that I'd ever heard on demo at my local store in Philly when I was a teenager. I've been searching after that kind of sound and memory for years, and by now, this time, my thoughts, I'm sure, have embellished the memory and listening experience to think that sound was much better than it possibly could have been 40 years ago. Now with the D'Agostino amp, I have a system that delivers the impact and sound that's better than anything I imagined and I remember from all those stories from years ago. The real character of the amp began to show after a week of use. It wasn't just me getting adjusted to the sound. The amp was burning in and settling into place. I also feel as if the Magnapan 20.7 speakers were finally functioning to their full capacity and reached another level of performance. This was after having had them in play for a year. It felt like they were broken into another level, and I think that's because the panels were finally being driven to their maximum. The initial enthusiasm of the strong and powerful bass was now being balanced with a deep and layered mid-range and smooth highs. There was less harshness and brightness in the sound. The Maggie tweeters are not very forgiving to any artifacts or glare in recordings or equipment. They will scream out and let you know when there's any digital glare or poor mastering of recordings occurring. I found the 20.7 speakers to have a tendency to be much brighter and harder to control in this area compared to my former 3.6 models of Magnapan speakers. This is one of the reasons I've lately been so attracted to using tube-designed equipment, because it has an easier time taming the ribbon tweeters. Now that the Agostino amp has done a great job in controlling this area's sound. The only other solid-state amp that I have been able to satisfactorily use is the Palladium 1K amps that are 300-watt monoblock amps made by Aragon. Those amps are supposedly biased to provide 125 watts of Class A before switching to Class AB for the remaining power. I find it very interesting that Dan DiAgostino was directly connected as the primary designer of the early Aragon amps. I also had a 4004 Aragon amp before acquiring the Palladium model. The Aragon amp models were often called the poor man's Krell alternative with good justification. The Palladium amp does a very good job of powering the speakers. However, it doesn't have the level of refinement and resolution of the newer DiAgostino amp. The Palladium sound presents a somewhat further recessed sound stage with a slightly veiled sound. The Palladium is quite good, but doesn't have the speedy delivery sound and clarity of the DiAgostino. I switched back to using Palladium amps after about a month of using the DiAgostino amp to see how the Aragon sound compared to my notes and memory. I played the Aragon for a day, went through a dozen recordings to get my relative bearings while the amps were warming up and settling back into place. That night, I waited for my wife to come home and asked if she heard anything different with the sound. She also has a great set of ears and is a terrific partner that enjoys music and indulges many hours of my musical endeavors and adjustments with various equipment. With the Aragon, she noticed the sound didn't have the same lifelike energy and excitement. Something was missing. The sound didn't have the same visceral impact with the speed and impetus that emulates live music like the DiAgostino amp provided. The speakers no longer launched the sound with a clarity and a dynamic delivery. It had taken a few weeks of experience, the magic and wonder of the DiAgostino amp, to train and expose our ears to the higher levels of performance that were possible from our stereo, and now we were hooked. The DiAgostino amp has enabled me to have a greater appreciation for the quality of my Prima Luna preamp and CD player. I now feel that I'm hearing the beauty and level performance of those designs are capable of delivering and contributing to the sound. The DiAgostino has been a more neutral and responsive amp that reflects exactly what is happening in the signal path. I may have the best of both worlds, having a tubed preamp and a solid-state amplifier, at least for driving these very demanding speakers I have with the Magnapans. The Carver Cherry 180 amp tube amps that I had been using previously seemed much too big and fat, and they were kind of bloated in the bass with a peaky boom down there. The Aragon amps seemed a little bit reserved and mellow, and the Agostino amp is a great complementary match for everything. I have a steady diet of live classical music at work all week long, so I don't come home at the end of each day yearning to hear a lot more, at least especially symphonic music. And frankly, most orchestra recordings have so many engineering issues and sound compromises that they never sound very real to me. The illusion of a 110-piece orchestra is performing in my living room is a bit far-fetched. Even so, I have thousands of CDs and LP recordings because I like to hear performances of this music, and when I'm in the mood for composers, conductors, and soloists that I don't hear at work. So I get to hear them at home. I love classical music and listen to lots of piano, chamber, vocal, symphonic repertoire. If you like Mahler, I suggest you check out the composer Valentin Silvestrov and the recordings made by Andrei Borieko. Borieko has been a guest conductor at work and autographed the banner hanging in my living room. I tend to listen to a lot of jazz at home. Audiophiles love their vocal recordings, and I do too. There are very few stereo demo tests can reveal quite as much information as the voice. It has to be balanced and presented just right to sound natural and real. It's not good if it's chesty, it's lean, fat, or bloated. It can have sibilance, be bright, nasy, or boomy. Now, there sure are a lot of ways that voices can be exaggerated and unnatural sounding. Now, in ideal circumstances, Magnepan speakers have a certain magic when it comes to singers. They can produce that image big as life, and then separate the vocal lines from the accompaniment very, very well and much better than most conventional speakers. It's been a pleasure to hear the presentation of the D'Agostino amp in this area. Not only does the amp get the voices right, but all of the instrumental accompaniments are spot on as well. Take for example Billie Holiday and Ben Webster and Harry Edison sessions. The dialogue and interplay between Billie with Ben Webster, it's just fantastic. And Harry Sweet's on that trumpet's got just the right amount of bite and snarl in his sound, especially when he's using his mutes. Teddy Wilson's playing on the piano and tickling the ivories. It just makes a great accompanist. Now, the D'Agostino amp brings out the separation of each of these individual voices and compels the listener to believe the performers are right here in the room. I could go on about the harmonies and the layers of inner revelations and musical interplay that I've heard uncovered in so many CDs and LP recordings, big bands of Ellington and Basie, Stan Kenton, Maynard Ferguson. I must have bought 10 more Maynard Ferguson records in the last 2 months. And I recently have been acquiring Mosaic box sets and picked up Oliver Nelson and Quincy Jones big bands, and those cats really could swing. Now, having this D'Agostino amp has gotten me into buying so many new recordings to enjoy the experience and sound of new repertoire. I've never been so excited to turn on music and have it playing all the time because it sounds so good. I could certainly go on with lots of more examples of recordings to enjoy both for evaluation and diagnostic tools. And hearing music reproduced at this level is a total pleasure. Now, another amazing area about this amp is it recreates the artificial landscape of electronica music. I made sure to have an audiophile from my local audio club come over to hear Klaus Schultz and Steve Roach, Orb, Robert Rich, among many other ambient recordings from Cabaret, Voltaire, and Richard Kirk. The kind of authoritative command in solid control and black background has the sound become a trip to outer space. Especially at nighttime, turn out the lights, just have that music, and you'll be transported into another realm and dimension. This amp's been a real winning combination for my speakers and other equipment. It developed a great synergy with everything after making a few adjustments with my accessories. It's been a real workhorse, playing flawlessly for day after day, for hours at a time. It's been nice that my electric bills haven't spiked and I don't have a space heater in my living room. It's a big hunk of a chassis in a case, but manages to fit nicely onto my rack. It may not have all the visual allure of the Momentum series of power amps, but it has much more affordable price. I haven't heard a direct comparison of this amp to the Momentum and can only surmise that the Master Power Classic Stereo goes a long way towards reaching the lofty achievement of Dan's other amp. Anyone should give this amp a serious trial if they need a powerful amp that exudes beauty and elegance that goes along with a lot of muscle and brawn. Now, I just want to share a few other comments that various friends have been over have said to me. From Bill, a friend of mine that I've known since high school, an oboist. He also owns magazines, heard all of my systems for the past 20 years. He called me the day after to say it was the first time that my stereo was more enjoyable than his own. And he said, it sounds like I'm at a concert. And from Mark, another Audio Club member, he said, I was very impressed with the Agostino Classic amp. It's all the power you can ask, has firm control of the bass, and a sweet mid-range, and is very fast. It's not your father's solid state. My summation is that this is a real statement amp from Dan. It proudly displays his name on the faceplate. I think any owner of this amplifier will share in that pride too. They will smile, be proud to see this amp as part of their system. The visual statement will make its presence known to everyone, but the greatest pleasure happens upon listening to it. Taking into account inflation and the rising cost of living, it seems a reasonable proposition to consider the $13,500 cost of today's price of admission to a higher level of musical satisfaction as well deserved. I confidently declare that the Maggie 20x7 has met its soulmate. This combination is truly memorable and a remarkable achievement. Job well done. Bravo.